Harry's wife. Harry, the interview. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Well, last night we were treated to Harry appearing on ITV, a commercial channel in the United Kingdom, for a near 90-minute interview with Tom Bradby, who has been friends or had involvement with Princes William and Harry for over 20 years. And there was also the screening of the Anderson Cooper interview, which was roughly half an hour on the 60 Minutes programme. I watched the interview on ITV1. I don't propose to do a blow-by-blow analysis of it, simply because some of it has been foreshadowed as a consequence of the teaser trailers, which I've already commented upon in parts passim. Furthermore, as a consequence of the Spanish, inverted commas, leak, many items in the interview were sort of rendered superfluous because we've already commented upon them. Instead, what I propose to do is give you some general observations about what we're seeing, what it tells us, and then I'm also going to segue my own observations in separate videos with news reportage from the newspapers also, effectively killing two birds with one stone. The interview took place in California. Tom Bradby was invited over to sit with Prince Harry. And what is interesting is his overall demeanour. He's a man who looks exhausted, and that's not a surprise. I know from my own victims, and of course the people that I consult with and provide them with world-class information to enable them to understand what they're dealing with and how they can deal with it and move forward, that dealing with our kind is exhausting. It grinds you down. And remember, Harry is in the sustained devaluation, so it's no wonder that he looks shattered. He doesn't know whether he's coming or he's going. Also, there's an individual there where you can see a simmering anger underneath and a defiance. And what's interesting is that what came across very clearly from the interview is the fact that he still does not see that he has any culpability for what's gone on in his life. You might think to yourself, spoiled brat, he's never had to be responsible for anything. Well, that is an understandable response, but he actually has had to show responsibility in the past. He may not be the world's best at doing it, but he's had to do so by virtue of being in the royal family. Now, of course, there have been hiccups, which is why the organisation, the institution around him steered him as it did. But he has had to show application. He has had to show responsibility. Freely admit, there have been instances where he has not delivered, but there are many instances where he has, and that should be remembered. He knew that he had a role, though at times perhaps he resented it, but I actually think with much of the criticism that he now puts forth is manufactured because of his wife. Again, I make the point. With Harry, you would look at him, and in the past, he was happy. He got along with his family, particularly his brother and his sister-in-law, the sister that he never had. He felt a love and a warmth for them, and you could see in the many pictures of him and the way that he engaged with the public and the way that he carried out his duties, he was happy. And then that changed. Why? Because of the appearance of his wife and the grip that she has on him. And all of a sudden, all the things that he once held dear, he's now scathing about, sceptical about, critical about. This isn't the black and white thinking of a narcissist, but this is the revision of his world outlook as a consequence of him being indoctrinated by a narcissist who's telling him now, everything you knew before, Harry, was wrong. You thought you were happy, but you weren't. Actually, he was, and now he isn't. Everything you believed before was wrong. No, it wasn't. But he's been made to think that it is. He's been made to think that his family are the enemy. That some of the thoughts and considerations that he had, legitimate ones, have been cultivated have been watered with the poison spilt by Harry's wife, so that she has ended up taking him to a place where he now is resentful, sceptical, dismissive, arrogant, that he believes it's him and his wife against the world, that he talks of there should be reconciliation and that he wants it, but he singularly fails, and this was demonstrated again throughout the interview, to see his role in the shitstorm that has been created and that of his wife. He has been singularly blinded to his and hers behaviour. She has repeatedly told him, we've got nothing to apologise for, Harry. They were the ones that caused us to be cast out of the royal family. They didn't protect me. They didn't protect us. They protected other people. You've tried, and you need to try. And Harry, of course, makes mention of the fact that he has repeatedly tried in the last 6 years to get his family to see his point of view. In fact, we got a bit of word salad, really, because Bradby basically posed the question of him. Everybody has families, and families have secrets, and generally it's the considered position that you don't go and air those secrets outside of the family. Yet you've gone and done that. You've told the world about the secrets, and people will say that you've done it for money. Harry's response is to say, it's known that there's a motto, and we now know from the Netflix documentary that it was just a motto of never complain, never explain. No, you say that, Harry. You say that it was just a motto, but that doesn't make it so. Of course, what he's doing there is he's swallowed what his wife has told him. That, that's not it's just a motto. They don't live by it, Harry. Example. Oh, yes, my sweet pea, you're absolutely right. And he swallows what she says again. So Harry says that that's the case. Doesn't mean that that is the case. And then we get some word salad, which you can just imagine that it's her hand up his yitter, operating him. I sit here now, speaking to you, answering the questions you put to me. The words and the truths will come from my lips, rather than using other people, especially through the tabloid media. We are 6 years into this, and I spent every single year of that 6 trying to get through to my family. Why were you not trying to get through to your family beforehand, Harry? Because you didn't need to. Why did you not need to? Because you were happy. You might have had some issues, and they're clear that you have those. But the point is this. You weren't cross-examining your family or probing and prying back then. Why? Because you weren't involved with the narcissist. The only reason that on a yearly basis you've tried to get through to your family is because your wife has told you to do that. That beforehand, you were perfectly happy with the position that you had. And now, because that doesn't suit your wife, she's told you, Harry, everything you know is wrong. And, like the dimwit that you are, but also affected by the trauma of the loss of your mother and your emotional thinking, you've accepted what she said. And it stands out so clearly in this interview that you are brainwashed, indoctrinated, that your thoughts have been commandeered and moulded in the way that your wife wants them to be. When he makes that comment to Bradby, he doesn't consider that perhaps his family have been trying to get through to him, but he can't see it. Oh no, the family are at fault, because that is the default setting within the Sussex household. And he hasn't been able to work out that this stance from the royal family of saying, no, that's not right, you're imagining things, etc., has only arisen since Harry's wife came along. And it shows just how tightly he is in the grip of her narrative about him and his relationship with the family. He talks about fleeing his home country with his wife and son, fearing for our lives. Melodramatic, again exaggerated by Harry's wife. It's interesting when he talks about the issue of post-traumatic stress disorder, as Bradby kind of throws him a bone there and talks about the behaviour suggests that you've got PTSD. And Harry, in a sense, immediately rejects that by saying, well, I've got post-traumatic stress injury. I'm not a person with the disorder. I know I'm not. And he denies that quite firmly, almost aggressively. And you can well imagine, again, that he's parroting what Harry's wife has told him. There's nothing wrong with you, Harry. You've had some issues, but I can help them with you. You're not disordered. You've just had a tough time, an injury. It's clear that the death of his mother has had a huge impact upon him. And as I've explained to you on many occasions, Harry's wife has come along and she has exploited that and used it against him. He talks about the fact that when he was 12, he saw the outpouring of emotion from millions of people, but he wasn't able to show any emotion. He talks about the surreal nature of the funeral and how he had many questions about that night. And interestingly, he talks about the fact that when he went through the tunnel, he formed the view that actually that there was no question of losing control of the vehicle unless you were blinded at the wheel. He seems to discount the fact, of course, that the driver had been drinking. And it makes clear that he assumes it's the paparazzi who blinded the driver, and again blames the press. And he has a deep-seated hatred of the press. He clearly believes that the press killed his mother, that hounded her in that particular way, and that resulted in her death. There's no mention about the fact that his mother wasn't wearing a seatbelt and how that might have saved her life, or the fact that the gentleman driving the car had been drinking, or the fact that they were going at speed. Once again, it's evident that the loss of his mother has affected him greatly. And notwithstanding the apparent intensive therapy that he's been in, it doesn't, to my mind, appear to have done any good for him. And then what's made it worse is that this vulnerability, which has sat at the heart of him, but he's managed with reasonably well within the support of the royal family, has been laid bare and exposed and used against him. It's evident, as the Colonel mentioned, that the behaviours are hinting at post-traumatic stress disorder, possibly as a consequence of the loss of his mother, maybe from his time in Afghanistan, possibly as a consequence of the abuse that he's on the receiving end of now. But what I can tell you is that a narcissist would never look this gift horse in the mouth. It's a special trait. When we come after you, we instinctively or calculatedly look for empathic traits, class traits, and special traits. If you read my book, Sitting Target, I go into greater detail about all of that. The fact that you have some vulnerability, like you're still grieving for your dead mother, and also the fact that they may well have called post-traumatic stress disorder, those are special traits which mean that you're easier to exploit, you're vulnerable, and we can use those vulnerabilities against you, triangulating you with them. And that's what Harry's wife has done. As I mentioned yesterday, she tells him to take his medicine, which he does willingly, not realising that she's actually tipping poison down his throat, and she is what keeps making him worse. She won't allow him to move on. She will keep reminding him of his dead mother. She plays the part of his dead mother. Tells him again, you're absolutely right, Harry. The royal family didn't support you. They were complicit in her death, fostering that hatred, fostering that resentment, so that now he's in a position that can be seen in this interview that he simply believes that he and his wife are the victims and that they are the ones that were hounded out of the country and that the press were at fault and the press killed his mother and the royal family were complicit in that and the royal family haven't supported him. And you could feel the heat of his resentment coming through the screen. What's also interesting is that at one part, he talks about trying to teach his grandmother, his Gangan, Queen Elizabeth II, an Ali G finger snap. And you notice the shift in his demeanour when he talks about his late grandmother. His eyes light up. The intense, exhausted stare, the resentment, the almost hypervigilance that has been occasioned by his ensnarement with his wife dissipates, and instead you see something of the old Harry reappears. It's also interesting when Bradbury touches upon the issue of his virginity. And Harry says, well, we can talk about you losing your virginity. Well, no, Tom Bradbury isn't the one that's told the world about it in a book. And Bradbury, of course, says, no, let's not do that. But he's almost, again, quite aggressive in the way that he does it. And he comes across as a man who's very much got a hair trigger. Now, some will say, well, he's a ginge and they're known for it, but it's more than that. The sustained devaluation that he's finding himself subjected to is driving this behaviour that is making him aggressive. And I thought Bradbury as a whole, we always know it's going to be a bit of a soft soap interview, but he did ask some fair questions and was being the journalist. And you could see Harry at times, how he responded to being accused of being scathing, and the way that he was probing in respect of saying to Bradbury, let's talk about you losing your virginity, that it doesn't take much to get him worked up. And he's been put in this position as a consequence of the way that his wife has treated him. It's also again apparent the resentment that he has towards his family, because he talks about how some members of the family have got into bed with the devil, i.e. the press, to rehabilitate themselves. And he says, well, fair enough, if you want to do that, that's all right by me. But the moment it harms other people, that's where I draw the line. And basically he's suggesting that his father engaged in that. And he also talks about how his father wasn't always there for him, and that his pa, as he calls him, wasn't made for single parenthood, but he tried. He resents his father with regard to a lack of support, which is not surprising given the fact that his father's a narcissist, and also the fact that he believes that Charles put the press ahead of his relationship with Harry. Now, he could have got along with that resentment, but of course his wife, again, self-serving, only caring about herself, comes along and utilises that and harnesses it. The whole demeanour of Harry throughout the interview was of a man almost ready to fight. And he's been put in that position as a consequence of the ongoing sustained devaluation from his wife that's wearing him down. And there are only periodic small glimpses of nice Harry, if you will, the Harry that existed before involvement. But what comes across very clearly from the interview is the complete inability to see that he's been brainwashed, the complete inability to realise that him and his wife have behaved in such a way that they merit disapproval and ostracisation that has occurred. He just can't get it, and it shows very clearly that he's still very much in the fog of the confusion created by his wife's manipulation of him. So those are some of my observations about seeing his demeanour and how he's behaving, which are symptomatic of the way that a narcissist treats a victim, particularly the intimate partner primary source, and some observations about some of the things that he touched upon. I'm going to, in separate videos, expand on this and also utilise the material that the press have, having watched it also. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.